And then from the other angle, you also have Google, who achieved their European banking license last year. You can see Apple releasing their credit card. You can see Facebook doing the same with the messenger payments. So you have big tech going into finance, and you have challengers looking at your market share. So at this point of time, the bank realized that we actually need to compete with the new generation of tech rather than the incumbent banks.
Probably, just as I am, sitting with a lot of different subscriptions, such as Netflix, HBO, telephone, electricity, etc. But did you know that the average consumer holds around 11 subscriptions at the same time? And if you just go to yourself for a second, you're probably paying for something every month without using it. And do you actually control it, and are you monitoring it? Today, you listeners, me and Bora will learn from two super intelligent guys how to scale fast in one of the most conservative of industries, the bank industry. How can a bank stay cost efficient and modern? In other words, how can they give their customers what they really want? No matter where you are and what you do, we all know that you need to transform into the digital world. And the European legislation, with, for example, PSD2, awakened a lot of sleeping banks and forced them to change. A B2B to C company that helps the customers to manage their subscriptions and save both time, money, and frustration is the Swedish success story of Minna Technologies. They are on a mission to bring power to the modern consumer, as they say. Their integrated products currently reach more than 20 million end users through their Tier 1 partnerships, including major players such as Lloyd Banking Group, Swedbank, and ING, to mention a few. And they are supported by the investor Visa. With us today, we have the CEO and co-founder of Minna Technologies, Joakim Sjöblom. We also have the VP of Marketing at Minna, Christoffer Pettersson, who holds both a bachelor and a master's degree in marketing. So on behalf of the Megadeals team and the Megadeals podcast, we are pleased to say welcome to Christoffer and Joakim.
Thank you very much, David. Happy to be here.
Thank you.
We are thrilled to have you. So Minna has been on a super interesting journey. You accomplished a lot of things in a short period of time. But what do you actually do, Minna Technologies?
So we're going to do 6 years in 30 seconds.
Yes.
So all of the products that we have been developing for the past 6 years is related to the global trend known as the subscription economy. So we realized 6 years back that consumers are shifting their mindset from buying products to subscribing to services. So obvious examples would be CDs and DVDs that nobody's buying anymore. People are subscribing to Spotify and Netflix instead. So with having a lot of subscriptions, you will face different challenges. So we build software solutions to help you to live a more convenient life in a subscription-based economy. That's the fundamental issue that we're addressing. And then we have some interesting perspectives into how to distribute this functionality, but that's a later topic for this show.
But you're a fast-growing B2B2C company, is that correct?
Indeed. So we started as a B2C proposition 6 years ago, but we also realized there was a big shift in the banking industry. So it ended up with utilizing banks and banking in general as a distribution strategy has been a crucial ingredient into this path.
And Christoffer, just to get you into the dialogue here, you are the VP of marketing, as we heard in the intro. And so what do you do on a daily basis?
On a daily basis, I work with the marketing and sales team. So we're trying to drive a consensus among banks that subscription management is the future of banking. So we see that in banking they're looking more and more towards digital services, and we're trying to basically get subscription management as one of those services that banks should offer as sort of part of the banking standardized banking offering. And as Joakim said, subscription management is clearly here to stay. So we're trying to talk about how important it is that people can manage their subscription management in their online bank, pretty much.
Great. And Joakim, you've been into the startup world for a quite long period of time. So what would you say was the starting point for Minna? Did you look at the regulation, how that changed the landscape and saw this opportunity? Or was it more you're looking into solving a problem for the consumer? And you have to be honest here.
No, that's a very good question. So I've been running tech ventures for the past 9 years, and the red thread in all of the companies that I started is that they have been based on personal experiences. So the experiences that were the foundation of Minna happened in 2013. I was a student at university at the time, and I did realize that I paid for several subscriptions that I didn't even use anymore. So one example was a video streaming that I hadn't logged onto for more than 6 months, but I was still paying for it. So this is annoying. I'm on a limited budget, but I'm still paying for it. And the second experience I had were a very bad cancellation experience. So when I became a student, they were supposed to switch my telco operator to go into the student price plan. And just the process of canceling your old contract was more than an hour long. So these were the issues that I experienced as an end user, and that's what we wanted to solve. And in 2013, I think we were a couple of years ahead of the breakthrough. So we saw this trend emerge that people are now starting to subscribe instead of consume. And now in 2020, it's very obvious. You can read several reports from McKinsey and the likes that this is now happening. So actually in Europe, you can see an average that one consumer have 11 active subscriptions today. There's almost a double compared to 2010.
So I think I have more than 20. So I'm able to gather all these 20 or 25 into your app as a consumer, and can I then connect that to my bank account? So I'm more in charge of what I want to close, what do I want to keep, but maybe get a better deal. Is that how the business model for me as a consumer work?
In 2013, that was the business model. So we launched as a B2C application, so we had our own mobile application, but we made an enterprise pivot, and that's why when we went into enterprise deals, so we're now selling this as an integrated solution to your bank. So we can just name a few of them, and I can do this even if I ask you not to name drop. So we're working with Swedbank, for example, in Sweden. We have Danske Bank in Denmark. We have OP Bank in Finland. So we're currently delivering our software across 7 markets in Europe. But in short, what you can do, if you are a Swedbank customer, you're just opening up your mobile banking application, and you can cancel your telco contract or your gym membership with one click inside the banking application. So no more calling into customer support. You just go into your bank and get rid of those things that you don't need anymore. So saving a lot of time and money. And as of today, we conducted more than 300,000 contract cancellations. So we generated savings more than 50 million euros. That's somehow significant.
Wow. But for me, as having another bank, and I want to log into your app, what do I do? Have to change the bank?
Indeed. Yeah. So this is all about our sales process, right?
Yeah.
How can we make sure that we work with the leading banks in each market?
Yeah, got it.
Exactly. If I'm doing my job, I'm able to pick that up and say that to your bank, that you have customers who want subscription management but are unable to manage them.
First of all, thanks for sharing, giving us some insights and setting the scene. But that also leads us really nicely into the sales process and kind of growth. And one of the things that, first of all, we were so pleased. You're actually one of our very early first clients that we work with. And we had a workshop, obviously, with you guys in Gothenburg, which was really good fun and exciting and very dynamic. And of course, one of the things that we see in the work we do daily is the enormous importance for scale-ups to do mega deals, right? Because, 2 or 3 deals could really, 3 to 4 times X the revenue of the business. We could 5 to 10X the value of the business in a very short amount of time, right? So the challenge, of course, is that it's easier said than done, right? Because these mega deals are extremely complex. And as you know, there are very few people that can really orchestrate these type of deals, and they lack the bandwidth of being involved in too many deals. So could you talk to us a little bit about that? So, you've obviously chosen a strategy to do mega deals and to do them as quickly as possible to drive significant growth. So walk us through we find that highly relevant. Walk us through that thinking.
So Megadeals in a scale-up fintech comes with two very big benefits. So one of them you already touched upon, but cash runway is always a challenge when you're running scale-up and you're running enterprise software. So you mentioned 3 to 4x. We actually grow by 500% over the past 9 months.
Wow.
So if you take that on an annual basis, you're looking at 7x. It's going to be hard to maintain, but a few enterprise deals really makes a difference.
Joakim, sorry, just a question on that. How many deals represents that growth?
5. And on top of that, I would also emphasize a second benefit, which is risk mitigation. So in our specific industry, risk is part of the DNA of our customers since we're selling to retail banks. Nobody wants to be the first, but everyone wants to be fast followers. So it's not only giving you a cash balance, it's also it's a big enabler of your next set of customers. So any early adoption curve going in from the early adopters to the early majority is all subject to the reference cases you get in those first clients. So the importance of having a few successful enterprise deals that can become your reference case and your stable cash flow, then you have a good foundation for the upcoming journey.
Chris, do you want to add something to that?
Yeah, and I would like to add something from the mission perspective, because also being in Megadeals is a faster way to realize our mission to bring power to the modern consumer and to really distribute this type of service to as many people as possible. So we can reach, through our banking, through one integration, we can reach 10 million people over a couple of months, which it takes to integrate. So that's faster for us to realize our mission than to go through App Store or Google Play.
But it was really interesting to meet you a couple of years ago, as you being one of our first customers. You were very far ahead. And when I say you, I mean the whole company. But Christoffer, we got the feeling that you kind of finally somebody comes here and talk the same language as I do, because you've been working pretty much as the book described for a long period of time. How would you say it has changed from before and after when Megadeals Advisory came to Minna?
But I would say it changed a lot. The Megadeals framework was extremely helpful for us to especially work together as one team and to have a structure and a glue that holds our strategy together. Because we're trying to both scale the sales and marketing team to get everyone on board and to figure out more efficient, there you go, there's the book, and to figure out more and more efficient ways of driving sales. And there's a lot of concepts in Megadeals that helped us forward. But to summarize, it helps us focus on the right thing, on the right things.
Would you like to, just building on that, so would you like to describe what was some of the things that you implemented straight away from a Megadeals strategy perspective that really kind of helped you on your journey of growing through Megadeals?
Yeah. So one thing that we sort of had, but that we doubled down on, was to go with one team, to have sales and marketing in the sales team, in the same team, and to approach the challenge of selling together. So we didn't end up with the unfortunately quite normal situation where you have one marketing team who just offloads a lot of leads to the sales team and then for them to figure out what to do with them. But another thing was that you introduced that was key, was work with the key initiative, and to identify prospects where their key initiative corresponded with a value proposition that we could actually offer. Meaning that we disqualified a lot of banks that weren't interested in any value we could provide, and they didn't have a key initiative or a budget that could motivate us working together. So basically skipping a lot of the fluffy talk about stuff you could do, and then just go to the point saying, this is what we do. Do you have an initiative around this? Do you have a strategy that needs our type of solution? And whenever we found a match, we sort of accelerated the interest in that deal pretty fast. So that's, in short, those two were very important. But then we have done a lot of things. We could perhaps go into this later and break down how we work with this. But key initiative and talk about that every day is extremely important. And I'm the annoying person internally. when we speak to a new prospect, the first thing I say, what's their key initiative? What's the business problem they're trying to solve? That's not always what the salespeople want to hear, because they're happy to just have a bank excited about subscription management. So I'm the annoying part there.
I want to come back to key initiatives, and I want to actually ask Joakim a question about that. But before we do that, another thing that really impressed us was that you took a lot of the learnings from Megadeals, and you industrialized it, and you really applied it and adopted it into your processes, right? Which is absolutely for any scale up or any business listening to this. This is absolutely critical. So rather than just doing a workshop or having a program and then everybody walks away half inspired, you guys rolled up your sleeves and started to implement into your day-to-day practices. Just share for us and the listeners a little bit about that and how you did that.
We have the same challenges in our everyday life. When you want to convince a bank / a customer to behave in a certain way, it's a similar challenge to get your own organization to behave in a certain way. So adoption. And going for a 2-day workshop with you guys had a short-term benefit in terms of motivation, but unless you act on the information, the outcome will be wasted. So the importance of adoption, of course. And if I should highlight one part that we did adopt on the topic of qualification that Christoffer mentioned, is really the T-shaped funnel. So being way harder on what accounts do we spend our resources on. And once we, let's say, qualify an account, the resources should 10x. And then we have a messaging framework that Christoffer can talk more about. So what kind of content do we expose at what stage in the pipeline, and how do we mix and match the physical touches with the digital nudges to these accounts? So if you want to, we can touch on this right now, because I think it's related to the new T-shaped funnel that we implemented.
Yeah, please do.
So Christoffer, do you want to run us through the 4 levels of messaging framework that we do apply?
Yeah. So just a quick point on that, automating and building automating this. I want to highlight that we're actually engineering driven. So we like, whenever you say automation and engineering, and when you can measure stuff with data, then you have our ears, because we really understand that we need to scale stuff beyond one-to-one conversations. And that's a big passion of mine. But we took the idea of a messaging framework, especially your fundamental framework. So we looked at our sales process, and we sort of planned for which part of the sales process is different types of content or messaging relevant. So for instance, whenever we decide to go to target an account, we don't begin talking about our product and value proposition before they even know who we are. So we try in the early phase, we try to drive discussions around the change drivers in the industry, saying that digitalization is happening. And basically, it's going to be about who has the best digital customer experience. So for instance, when you have a contact with your bank today, 9 out of 10 times, or maybe even 99 out of 100 times, you have it through your app. And we talk about the importance of sort of taking this to your organization and understanding how do we go from having a branch to becoming basically a tech company, building front-end code, interacting with customers through code and more self-service. So that's the core. The entire digital transformation is why Minna exists. Without it, we wouldn't have reason to exist. But then we go from that to talking about, okay, what alternatives could banks have? And we tried to stay quite neutral in the beginning, not pitch Minna, really. We just say that these are the high-level alternatives you have as a company to approach your business problem. And in there, we also promote partly our competitors, but we promote the entire idea of focusing on your digital app and the digital customer experience. And then later on in the sales process, we also talk about break down the different alternatives. So saying, what would it mean if you went with another type of solution than subscription management would be categorization. When you log into your bank and you see how they categorize your expenses. So we could talk about that and saying, what's the benefit of that versus benchmarking to subscription management, to benchmarking to what's the value you get from having Apple Pay offering Apple Pay in your bank. Because the banks really look at what options, what roads are we going to go down to. We're going to pick one, and we're going to pick the one that makes most sense for our business case. And then when they go down to subscription management, we don't have much competition. We start to get a little bit competition now, but usually when they figure out that subscription management is the category to focus on, we are usually coming out on top. We're the market leader and we have the sort of the biggest logos so far. But we do have content, of course, around how our particular product, our particular value proposition addresses their key initiative. So that would be the last part of the funnel. But we don't begin with that, because then they say we haven't looked at all the alternatives. If we go too fast on ourselves, they say we haven't evaluated our alternatives, and then kind of kills the mood a little bit.
So one thing that this process has taught me that I think about every day now is that this step 4, which is most about the vendor selection, is actually the easiest one for us. So I think that our competition is way harder on the other levels. So already from the top, most of the banks realize that digital transformation is a key initiative that we need to act upon. But they are balancing their resources on this initiative versus anti-money laundering activities or KYC activities. So the hardest thing to pull through is actually the absolute top player to get the bank to invest more in their digital experience rather than compliance processes, as an example.
Yeah. I mean, this is a school book example of how to map this up. But that was exactly going to be my question, Joakim. So you nailed it, because if I was the buyer, if I was the CEO, for example, of this bank, I would look to this category, but I will also look to all the other things that I have to do that follow with Payment Service Directive 2. So stay in compliance, because risk mitigation is, especially for the banks, staying in compliance is highly up on their agenda, right? So you are competing with that, right? With that category.
Indeed. And there are different buckets of resources that we need to ask for. So most of the banks actually have budgets for digital transformation, but another bottleneck might instead be technical resources. So they have the money to buy our product, and then you need to be very well aware that if you want to sell enterprise software, you should design your product so it's as easy of an integration project as possible. So don't optimize for price, optimize for convenience for the buyer. That's also super important to understand.
I really like the way you guys describe how you've shifted in your messaging architecture of how you communicate your proposition. But before we move on from key initiatives, I just want to direct this question to you, Joakim. When we were having a pre-discussion about this, you raised something that I think was really interesting. And, we talk about key initiatives from how do we qualify banks in this case to get them to invest in what you do. But you raised a really interesting point around how key initiatives may have changed quite significantly during this COVID period. So walk us through a little bit, because, that's a bit of a, what happened, and 2, how did you guys handle that?
Well, that's a great bullet. So we can spend a lot of minutes on this. But in short, if you take a chronological order over the past 6 years, if you went to a bank in 2014 and say, hey, we got a business idea that might enhance your digital banking experience. In order to deliver this, we need to read your data. They will throw you out of a window. So reading bank data 5 years ago, there was not even, it didn't exist. And then came 2016, and we started to see the early framework of PSD2, and suddenly these propositions got regulated. So by the regulation forced the bank to reiterate what do we actually want to do with data. So that had a major impact on key initiatives. Because what happened now when this got regulated is that the competitive landscape of the bank completely changed. So just looking in Sweden, Swedbank and Nordea, they are not really competing with each other anymore. The market share that moves between these players is insignificant. Same goes for the UK, so Barclays and Lloyds, they are not each other's biggest competition. The new generation of competition are the challengers that are actually stealing significant market share. You can look at the Revoluts and the Monzos and the N26 of the world. They are competing on core banking products. And then from the other angle, you also have Google, who achieved their European banking license last year. You can see Apple releasing their credit card. You can see Facebook doing the same with the messenger payments. So you have big tech going into finance, and you have challengers looking at your market share. So at this point of time, the bank realized that we actually need to compete with the new generation of tech rather than the incumbent banks. And this pivot for incumbent banks to start competing on a tech level with Google is not happening. I would say that this key initiative was the main enabler of Minna, that the bank's perspective moved from competition to collaboration. In order to survive, we need to provide as good of a digital experience as the new generation of competition. And in order to do so, we need to collaborate. So in Sweden, you can look at Swish and BankID. Both are great products, and they are jointly built by the big banks in the consortium. So this mindset was a big enabler. And just to spin further on key initiatives, we are right now in a pandemic. So if you want to sign up for a mortgage in Sweden, 99 out of 100 cases, you need to visit a branch and talk to your bank, contact person. If you look at the UK, the branches are closed. You can't even go to meet a physical person. So you need to run a digital transformation to actually sell your products online. And this is a process that would have taken 3 years. And now they're forced to do it in 3 months. So the focus and the budgets for this has increased a lot. And one final point would be cost of operations. Speaking about this new area of competition, if let's just take Sweden as an example, since I know that some of the listeners would understand at least. Swedbank are now competing with Klarna. Klarna has their banking license. Klarna don't have a single branch open for physical visits, while Swedbank have more than 100. So they have a 10,000 employee organization versus a 2,000 employee organization, and they're offering the same products. How can you stay competitive with that kind of a cost structure? The bank needs to have a digital offering to stay competitive. The cost of operations is not sustainable.
I love the way you frame this. I mean, the way you look at the macro trends, you understand the drivers, which pains it creates for your clients, which gains it's creating, and then pushing on that compelling reason to buy. Thanks for sharing that. It was really insightful. And just to summarize where we are, so we kind of started off talking about the importance of doing mega deals in a scale up and how you can, in your case, 5x your business. And obviously that increases the value of the business. We then moved on to talk about what are some of the elements of mega deals that you guys have been focusing on. And we've kind of spent a lot of time on key initiatives. But there's also another area that you guys talked about, which is really important. I know it's important for you guys, is risk mitigation. So we've touched upon that a little bit. So talk to us a little bit more about the importance of risk mitigation and how you're using that in your discussions with banks to influence them.
Oh, in what end should we start this answer? So I think a challenge when you're selling to a company that most of them are public listed companies, they have profit targets on a quarterly basis. How do you get them to understand that you have the opportunity to have a Tesla stock evaluation, or you can remain on a Ford stock evaluation? So the banks need to understand that innovation in itself holds a value for your shareholders. So it's not only about paying dividends on a quarterly basis, it's about reinvesting to stay relevant 5 years from now. And saying this to banks, so I'm a bit of a provocative person myself.
Really?
So,
no, really?
I always need to challenge myself to have a healthy balance. So I understand the logic of their business, and well, the term fat and happy is pretty applicable. But we also need to educate them. So this is one of the challenges I have with the Megadeals framework, and I think this might be relevant for you to hear, that we're selling into a customer segment that might have not changed their key initiatives yet, but we know that they will do. So this is a very hard balance of timing. Should we invest time to drive consensus inside an organization to help them phrase their next generation of key initiatives? Or should we only invest our time and focus towards mature accounts that already made this realization? And that's super, super hard for me. So in what order do you run the 5 pillars of Megadeals? Not all of them are always checked. So customer qualification is really, really challenging when selling to banks.
Have you made up your mind, or are you still having that battle?
So right now I am, let's say, on a 70-30 scale. So we're sticking to the framework. If there is no key initiative, it's not worth us spending our time. And I think that's the methodology that we need to have across the organization. However, from my position, I do want to be a provocative voice in the community. So I think the organization is working according to a framework that we call Megadeals, which is a derivative of the Megadeals framework.
Just to be clear, listeners, we're not talking about mini deals. We're talking about Minna deals. This is very important.
In deals, so Minna Technologies, Minna deals.
Now, I think it's a good balance, if I can comment on that. So it's not where Minna is on the bell curve or the technology adoption life cycle where is that category, right? And since I don't have the answer to that, maybe you have, but I think there has to be a lot of more education out there. You will be one of the guys and one of the companies who educate, but you need help from others, and you get a lot of support from other companies trying to do the same thing as you are doing, disrupting different areas and categories. But I think you have to stay focused on the ones that want to change at this point and win that battle first. But at the same time, yes, when you disqualify a customer, you still want to have a cup of coffee with them sometime. You still want to be in their face and point them in a certain direction. So that's why I love about the Megadeals framework, that how you can use the digital touch points and actually influence people and companies without having to meet them all. So if you spend, 10 or 30, it doesn't matter, I think, % on your digital marketing on that category, but you spend the majority of time and money on the ones that actually want to change or believe what you believe. I think that's a great strategy, if I can comment on that.
Yeah, indeed. And Christoffer can speak more about this, but that is also how we allocate the messaging architecture. So in the sales pipeline, we have a long list of leads that don't have a key initiative yet, but we still expose that level 1 content to them.
Good.
To somehow nudge them. Moving into 2021, you should consider this.
But one thing that we can see that's what's happening inside, because banks are big organizations. So we know that for every bank, there's a group of people who are always thinking about this, digitalization, if they should put an urgency to that as a key initiative. But they need to do an internal sell. So we have seen when we bring them really good material that they can share with internal stakeholders, we have seen examples where that sort of accelerates our deal. It sort of answers all the internal objections to, especially regarding risk, to why they should focus on implementing a solution developed by an external party, which is completely different from how they usually work. They usually historically build everything in-house. So that is one way we could affect it. We have seen evidence of it, but it's, as Joakim said, it can be hard to know how far have that discussion around the key initiative been going? How far is it internally? And they're not always early in the sales process eager to share exactly where they are. But when they see that we have a common goal where our value proposition actually meets hypothetical key initiative that someone believes in their heart, because you have a lot of fighters internally, that we could have a match, and that could transform into something that's happening more than just a discussion.
I just need to raise one flag here related to the Megadeals framework. There is a big trap if there is a discrepancy between key initiative and consensus. So we have seen examples where we have seen initiatives, that there are budgetary initiatives to venture into a specific area of products. But when it really comes to show, there is not consensus to take a decision on a senior enough level. So you can see a lot of banks hosting these accelerator programs to go into the next generation of digital banking. So they have a few million euros into budgets. But when it comes to signing a master service agreement, those people are not bought into that key initiative. So you need to have both the consensus and the key initiative, or it will fail.
Agreed. No, and you're right. And it's part of the 5 cornerstones as well. It's difficult to live on their own. You're right.
Indeed.
On that subject, so the ones that you have done big deals, mega deals, because you have done a few, right? Has that been with a partner that you were doing something with already? So was that an existing customer of yours, or was it a brand new signing?
Both. I would say the vast majority are new contracts. That's part of our sales strategy. But we also have seen good evidence of increasing value per account, and renewing contract terms is also a very crucial part of business. So far, 0 churn. I'm very proud of that. So let's maintain that number. And if you have a high adoption rate from the end user, and this is a complexity when you're running B2B2C, we need to serve the bank and we need to serve the end user. However, if the end user have a high level of adoption and satisfaction, the bank is almost forced to keep your product. So there's a good opportunity for increasing revenue per account if you have a good value prop for the end user.
It's impressive that you signed mega deals with new customers. I would say it's quite rare.
Thank you for that. I hope we'll succeed with a few more. And I think one very big advantage we have in our product suite that even though we charge premium, so it falls into the Megadeals category, our business models actually holds a cash flow positive effect for our customers. So just to take an obvious example, let's say that your son signed up for PlayStation Plus or Xbox Gold, meaning that you are on an active subscription, you're using your card, but you don't even have the password because your son signed up for it. What you will do is that you're going to call into your bank and ask them to cancel the payment or even cancel your full card to get out of the subscription. This is an enormous cost for the bank just to answer the phone with people trying to get out of subscriptions.
Great example, yeah.
So by integrating our product, the bank is actually reducing their back office volumes. And then you go into the key initiative.
But Joakim, just to be clear, the deals that you signed, are they land and expand deals? So you've signed them maybe on a smaller deal, but then you're expanding into the business. So the new deals you're talking about, is it a land and expand, or are you getting the full deal from day one?
All of them are land and expand. Okay. So it goes into two elements. We always apply ramp-up pricing. So the price will increase year over year during the term of the contract. And there are, of course, opportunities in terms of discounts in general and what products we start with. So we have a product suite that contains more products than one. So the foot in the door that serves the key initiative is always the land and expand product, but the expand category should be there, or the strategy of expanding should be there from day one.
Yeah. So just to be clear, back on David's point, when we talk about signing new deals, actually it is very much in line with our research because we very seldom see mega deals done in one go. It's a land and expand, right? So you come in, you do a deal, you kind of show your trust that you can deliver, and then that expands into broader business. So it's very much in line with how we see mega deals done. It's very seldom we see a mega deal from day one where the full deal is exploited.
And in general, I am skeptic towards channel strategies into early stages of a company. But to have strategic partners that help you to run a consensus in the ecosystem has proven to be very valuable. So looking at the Gartner and the Forrester of the likes, always, of course, they serve a purpose. But we also have Visa as an investor. And Visa is the biggest payment company in the world. And just having their knowledge and market insights, and they help us to run these, let's say, very high-level key initiatives manipulation. Sorry for the wording, but education is a better word. That has proven to be super important. So as a Swedish FinTech and you want access to some of the biggest banks in the world, it will not happen unless you have that third party vouching for you.
Absolutely spot on. And you've nailed it, because in the research we did when we talk about the ecosystem and mapping the ecosystem, the big difference between mid-sized deals and mega deals is that in the ecosystem you also have players outside the organization of the client. Just to your point, Visa is a great example. There's politicians, it could be other types of organizations, it could be suppliers, consultants, that impacts the ecosystem. But what you're doing here is actually two phenomenal things. One, you've recognized that there is an external party outside the buying organization in the ecosystem, but it's influenced the ecosystem. But the second thing you're doing is actually relying on the risk mitigation principles, right? So you're taking a huge organization like Visa, who has enormous credibility, a big brand, and using that credibility to endorse yourself, which is really pure risk mitigation. So it's brilliant. I agree.
And it goes into selling through the whole product. And Christoffer, maybe you want to talk 1 minute on this, because I know that a lot of young startups is only selling on products. So what kind of a feature do we deliver? What kind of a product value? But selling to banks, they buy way more than just the functionality.
Yeah. First of all, one point there, I think it's a great topic to discuss, because normally fintechs, they go in and talk about core products. They can be quite technical and say, we have this feature and that feature, and it performs this in X amount of percentage. And for a customer who's buying a product like ours for the first time, they don't know how to benchmark technical details. They are more worried about, will this company we're buying from, will they exist in 5 years? Do they have financing? So for us to say we have Visa as investors, they think, well, they wouldn't have invested, first of all, if they don't have a good product, but more importantly, they will be around if we buy them. Because if they buy a feature and we go bankrupt, if we run out of cash, well, then they stand there with an empty feature and need to roll it back. So that is one thing. But then when it comes to banks, they are by nature very risk averse. So I don't know any company, any type of company or any industry where you have so many people who are working with risk. Maybe insurance, but it's all about risk and the compliance. And banks have, so they have so many regulations to follow, so many frameworks also to follow. So part of their technical journey have been just to make sure they're compliant with all the technical requirements that have been given sort of by the European Union and goes into the open banking discussion. So they want to know, are we compliant with all the regulations they need to stand up to, because they are sort of the issuer behind the service. So they're putting their brand on stake. And then when it comes to security, I mean, a potential data leak would be detrimental, right? If customers' transaction data were to leak. So we really need to convince them that we are as secure as if you were to work with a Microsoft or a Google, which I believe we are. But normally you need proof of that because we don't have that strong of a brand. And then when we have covered all of those things, we talk about the product, of course. But usually the user value for us is quite evident. We have such an intuitive service that people get it. Everyone has subscriptions. Most people get it. Like, it would be good to have it in our bank. That's not the issue. The issue is more the other things, right?
Stoffer, what you're saying is music to our ears, because we talk about value gets you through the door, but it's risk mitigation that closes the deal. And what you guys are focusing on is just risk mitigation, risk mitigation, risk mitigation. And then once that's checked off, it's like, all right. Yeah. So it's...
Yeah, but you see fintech and tech companies, they do this mistake. I believe, I see it all the time. They talk about us.
Absolutely.
They don't drive other type of discussions going back to the fundamental framework. It's only about them and the product.
Yep.
I think this is a generic tip for the listeners, that you have a fixed amount of resources. Make sure to think twice about your allocation. So over the past years, we put such a big amount of our resources into PCI DSS compliance, ISO 27000 processes. We could have designed a new feature instead. But I think we made the complete right choice that if you want to sell, well, don't just focus on your product. Make sure to serve these other needs of your customers.
Brilliant. Brilliant.
And it's a misunderstanding that the whole product is about just the product, but it's everything around that. And what we see now when going into maybe a crisis or bad economical situation and landscape is that you need to focus even harder. You have to double down on specific areas and maybe take away things instead of adding new features. So we had Michael Eckhart from the Chasm Group, and they always talk about how you probably need to look into take away and disqualify things, which is hard when you are innovative and technology driven. You always want to add something new. And one of the best examples, I think, even if you're maybe not the biggest Apple fan, Joakim, it's quite cool to see how Steve Jobs maybe had 2-3 things that he could deliver to the market, which was groundbreaking and totally changed the environment and the landscape, but they hold back and just launched one at a time, focused 8 years on one thing, and then they launched the next one. It's hard. It's extremely hard.
So all of the things that we've been talking about ties back to the key initiatives. So one benefit with our product suite is that we serve 3 very different key initiatives. So we have products that will help the bank to increase engagement and retention. We have another product that will help the bank to monetize their user base. And then we have a third product that is purely designed to lower the cost base of the bank to enable a smoother, let's say, cost of operations for the bank. And I think given the pandemic, more and more key initiatives have now turned into the later one. So it's more important now for the bank to make sure that they can have, well, a good oversight of their cost model and make investments into optimization. And just to run the consensus across the organization that your priorities has now changed over the past 6 months. That is something we need to work a lot with. So Christoffer, maybe you want to run through part of the consensus?
Yeah, I'll be happy to. So after our first workshop with you guys at Megadeals, we have been thinking a lot about how do you apply this in practice. So I'll be happy to share I'll boil it down to a 5-step model. Can take it quick, but to drive consensus, we first of all, what we do, I mentioned before, but we work as one team with sales and marketing, and we do research together. We look at the entire markets, and then we say, where shall we focus? And I think focus is a key first part. And what that means is also disqualify. So we work with, we decide on a couple of accounts that these are of high interest. We have some type of proof or indications that they're working towards key initiatives that we can actually serve with corresponding value propositions. So we read in annual reports, we're out talking to people. That's not that different from regular sales work, but the different part is that we then go and fish with spears, as we say. So we focus on a few fishes rather than putting out a net and try to catch everyone. And then we do, once we have identified an account, we do stakeholder mapping together. So then we work with technical tools like HubSpot to build the org charts. And then we use LinkedIn Sales Navigator. It's a fantastic tool to collaborate. And then they have lists. So you can basically handpick people and add them to lists based on their job titles, saying this person is likely important to the deal because him or her has a VP position in innovation or product development, etc. So then we build an account, could be 200 to 300 people, a list, which is only interesting people working at one bank in our case. And then we plan that would be step 2 to do stakeholder mapping. So step 3 would be to choose the content stack for that account. Because we have content addressing all the value propositions we have. But if we can only show what's relevant for them and really put in their key initiatives into our text, so customize the message for the account, they're more likely to, first of all, pay attention to us. It's hard competition today. There's a lot of companies pitching in emails and etc. So we and in advertising. So we try to first of all be sure about the content, so they will like it and that there's actually relevant for their key initiatives. And then the 4th step would be to start distributing these messages. Then we come into partly working with account-based advertising, but also bee swarming. So we have the sales team are bee swarming and visiting all of these people we have chosen, all of their accounts. And we can have the entire team can work from the same list. So it's very easy to bee swarm each other's accounts as well. And then we show perhaps 10 different content pieces towards this account. So every day they see a new content piece that's highly relevant for the key initiative. And step 5 is converse and convert, where we look for one way of calling it is indicators of some type of interest, where you could see at the lowest level, you can get a profile visit back. That's one sign that they at least know who you are. They know you exist. They have seen our brand, being exposed to it and interacted with it. Then you have likes, and then you have comments, video views. So then you could see what people are interacting. Then you can start engaging those people in conversations, especially if they comment on your posts on LinkedIn. You could say, thank you for commenting, add something relevant, not pitching in the first message. I often hear your colleague Christoffer Engman, he talks about how he runs away when someone pitches in the first email. That's a no-go. So what you do is that you talk about what's relevant for that person. Perhaps you comment on the discussion they initiated in, and you talk about their bank and you talk about something that's relevant without pitching. And then you bridge that into sales discussions. You can bridge chat conversation to private conversation to a video call, which is, of course, traditional sales to bridge that. But then you know what people who are actually invested and have interacted. Because if people ignore you, they're likely harder to initiate discussions with. So this 5-step model covers everything from research to stakeholder mapping to the content and how we target them. So by doing this, we exclude 99.9% of the industry.
I think my favorite part of this is that we tied this stack of content to the maturity of the sales pipeline. So whenever a deal is qualified, it moves from the lead stage to a qualified stage, in which case we will automatically switch the content stack that is exposed towards that account. And now we are so mature in this, so I can just tell Christoffer that we need more level 3 content. And that's all I need to say. And there will be an infographic or a case study created towards this account in this level of the messaging framework. So the amount of efficiency and what content that is exposed to whom is so close to automated that it can be.
Yeah. Another point just to add to that, because when you mentioned the fundamental framework and the different levels, I suggest everyone to have at least a couple of different variations of those depending on the market. Because if you talk about change drivers in UK, they might be different than change drivers in Russia. They are in different, even countries are on different parts of the bell curve, right? So you don't want to talk about the key initiative that doesn't have, for instance, legal basis or anything else in a country, right? So have a couple of versions of the fundamental messaging. That's one recommendation to the listeners who try to do this.
Yeah, and it's a good point. And the messaging is a very key criteria for the messaging is it's one per audience. So back to your point, Stoffer, if the audience is different, the messaging could be completely different. So that's a key rule. Agreed.
Yeah. And also a final point, if you do this quite rigorously, you see that it's impossible to address each and every company in the entire market with such a rigid process. So by default, by doing this, you will disqualify.
Guys, this honestly, I think we could go on for hours and talk to you about this. This is so exciting and it's music to our ears, and we love dissecting how you're really implementing a lot of the elements around Megadeals and what you're doing, and obviously your results and performance are really phenomenal. It's so fun to watch. David, I think we should start to wrap it up.
First of all, I want to say it's really impressive to listen to you guys. You both extremely smart, and then you also are executing on all these things. So amazing. It's going to be so interesting to follow you, and I'm looking forward to, if you're planning on coming on to the stock market one day, I will be the one who invests on day one for sure, because I really believe in you. And we always ask our guests about a mega dealer that they want to listen to in a podcast coming up, and also a book that you have read. And I know you guys have read a lot of books, so if you can choose one that stands out, it doesn't have to be marketing or sales, it could be something completely different.
So I started with the mega dealers, and just looking at our industry, I'm super fascinated about enterprise software deals in general. And if we talk about banking software, that would be specific. Sorry, I forgot the name right now, but I know that a few of our clients are also using HubSpot as their CRM. And I know that this process of selling a cloud-based software into the banks 10 years ago was really, really challenging. So that would be interesting to hear about that experience of selling cloud into an organization that never used cloud. I'll get you the name.
Cool. Great, thank you.
Can I suggest a dream guest?
Yeah.
You should have Daniel Ek on when he was signing record labels for Spotify. That would be very interesting to hear about how he managed to do that, because that's one of the most impressive deals I've ever heard of. And for the book's sake, we have covered, it would be easy to say Crossing the Chasm, such a good book that goes well with Megadeals. But I would say my favorite book on especially innovation and entrepreneurship, is 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel. It's a really good book.
So if I should say one book, I would say Principles by Ray Dalio.
Oh, yeah, that's
good one.
I think it's really good about how do you lead people to work aligned with where you want to go.
Thank you so much for taking the time and sharing all these insights of your really amazing journey over the last few years. I really thank you.
Thank you so much. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening today. We hope that you enjoy this conversation as much as we did. We will be back soon. Until then, please subscribe and follow us on social media. Interact with us the way you like, and we wish you a fantastic rest of your day. Bye now.